Hello y'all, and welcome back. We're talking about Aristotle. Aristotle starts at Plato's Academy when he's 17, and he stays at Plato's Academy for 20 years. Aristotle is often referred to as Plato's student, and I don't think that's strictly accurate. We have no record of him formally studying under Plato. He is hanging around the school that Plato founds, but Aristotle is an independent genius who has attached himself to the most reputable institution of the day, to make use of its resources, to engage with its resident intellects, but make no mistake, he is very much doing his own thing the whole time he's there. Plato is the only person that Aristotle consistently refers to with respect and even great fondness and love. He always refers to Plato as our friend, never to my knowledge by name, but always as our friend. It's obvious who he's talking about, even if he disagrees with Plato, which he frequently does. So he's at Plato's Academy for 20 years. Somewhat after that, a little bit after he leaves Plato's Academy, when he's about 40, Aristotle receives a letter. It's really most likely a messenger, but he receives a message. And it is from Philip II. Now, Philip II, after a number of kings, is now king of Macedon. Aristotle knows Philip II from his childhood. They're roughly the same age. They grew up in the court together. So Aristotle would know Philip II personally. And Philip says, Aristotle, I need your help. I have this son, 13-year-old kid. He's precocious as all get out, and I want to give him a formal education. But there's a couple of problems. One is he doesn't care about school at all. He just cares about fighting and war and horses and military strategy. That's all. Second, he won't listen to any tutor. I've given him the best tutors I can find. He won't listen to them. He thinks he's smarter than them. He probably is smarter than them. And I really want him to have an education because I know, Aristotle, that you Greeks think that us Macedonians, and in particular the Macedonian rulers, are just these meatheads who only care about military stuff and don't know how to read and don't know, capitals of countries and stuff like that. And I don't want my son to turn out like that. I want him to have an actual education. I'm determined that this happens. Now, he's heard of you, Aristotle, and he speaks of you with respect, and I think you're literally the only person that he would actually listen to. So, here's my offer. If you come up to be the personal tutor to my son, I'll pay you whatever you want. I'll build you a school. You can live in the palace, live wherever you want. Blank check. And also, Philip adds this, and I think this is funny. I think it's funny. Philip says, so last year I was raiding in North Greece, and I may or may not have burned down your hometown of Stagira. But if you come up and work with me tutoring my son, I will rebuild your hometown. What do you think? So Aristotle is intrigued. He has kind of done everything he has to do, or he wants to do rather, at Plato's Academy. He's been wanting to move closer to where he's from for a while, but he's also actually heard of this kid. As young as this kid is, he's heard about him, and he's intrigued. And he says if half the rumors are true, this kid's like a once-in-a-generation personality or talent or intellect, and I want to meet him. So he accepts Philip's offer, and he moves up to Macedon and takes up residence in the court of King Philip as personal tutor to Philip's young son, Alexander. And Alexander, of course, goes on to become Alexander the Great, the greatest general in human history, and, incidentally, LGBTQ icon. Aristotle tutors Alexander for what is effectively his middle school and high school years. Then they part company. Aristotle returns to Athens, where he founds a school of his own, the Lyceum, and Alexander goes on to conquer the entire world. So this is the entire world east of Greece. So all of Greece, Macedon, all of Turkey, Asia Minor, all of the Stans. This is going to be north of the Arabian Peninsula, but then all the way, way into India. So the entire Persian Empire, Alexander takes over. Alexander is unique in military history, partly for many reasons, but partly because he believes that he is a god. Alexander really genuinely believes, I think, that he is divine, he's immortal, and this affects the way that he leads his military campaign. So it's customary for ancient generals to go into battle surrounded by several layers of protection. So you'd have foot soldiers, and then more heavily armored soldiers, and then the special forces, and then the general's personal bodyguard. So he was insulated, which at some level makes sense because he's your most important guy. You don't want him to die. And Alexander would turn all this on its head. He had the same horse his whole career, horse Bucephalus, and he would ride into battle at the front of his troops, the very front of his troops, on his horse Bucephalus. And his troops saw this, but of course the enemy saw this as well. And they all had the same thought. The only reason somebody would do this is if he actually can't die, if he's actually immortal. And so his troops would fight as if they were fighting behind a god with that degree of loyalty and dedication. And the enemy was understandably quite unnerved. Maybe this guy is divine, right? Maybe we really have no shot. So, as a result, Alexander would end up winning battles like the Battle of Gaugamela against the Persian army that he had absolutely no business winning. He was vastly outnumbered. And with this and then some kind of top-level military strategy, Alexander and the Macedonian army were able to take over the entire known world in a few short years. But one big drawback of believing you're a god is that you make no provision for what happens when you die. Alexander didn't believe he would die, so he had no will, he had no real heir, he had said nothing to anybody about, hey, when I die, leave this to this person, that to that person. So when he did die at the very young age of 33 in 323 BC, it seemed as if there would be massive chaos and civil war, because literally the entire world, his empire, was left to no one. At the last minute, however, they were able to come up with this agreement, and the known world, Alexander's empire, was carved into 4 pieces, and each piece was given to one of Alexander's 4 generals. These generals held on to these parts of the world for longer and shorter periods of time as the rapidly expanding Roman Republic began to take over the world. Again, this is the world, generally speaking, east of the Italian peninsula. The very last descendant of one of Alexander's generals to maintain power in one of these 4 parts of the world was a Macedonian queen with some Egyptian blood mixed in named Cleopatra. Cleopatra was a political and military genius in her own right with immense personal charm and charisma. She took up with Julius Caesar, perhaps the greatest Roman general of all time. When he died, she took up with his top general, Mark Antony, and by, again, just power of personality, convinced Mark Antony to move in with her in Egypt and just basically live with her. Meanwhile, a 19-year-old kid, the great-nephew and adopted son of Julius Caesar, was rapidly rising through the ranks of power in Rome. His name was Octavian, and he is, in my estimation, the greatest political genius of all time. If Alexander the Great's the greatest military genius, Octavian's the greatest political genius. And a big part of his power kind of collection was his posing Antony and Cleopatra as this massive threat to Rome, this sort of foreign sorceress with power over this Roman general as a massive threat to Rome and the integrity of the Roman Republic. This all came to a head in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium, where the armies of Octavian went up against the combined armies of Antony and Cleopatra. Antony and Cleopatra were defeated. Antony was killed. Cleopatra, rather than suffer the indignity of being captured and paraded, committed suicide. And Octavian ascended to power as the sole ruler of the entire world, and very shortly after that became Caesar Augustus, the first Roman emperor. So the Roman Empire, how often you think about the Roman Empire, right? That started in 31 BC, effectively. This is very rough, obviously. Okay? So this is all just to set up the historical period between the death of Alexander the Great and the beginning of the Roman Empire, at least the Battle of Actium, is itself a period in the history of philosophy or ethics. And it's to the philosophy of that period that we will turn in the next module. Thanks.